Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Dr. Ellen Langer, who's a social psychologist and the first female professor to gain tenure in the psychology department at Harvard University. She is the author of 11 books, I think, and maybe more, and she does a lot of research in the area of mindfulness. So I'm really anxious to talk to you today. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Diane.
You know, I've had so many guests on the show talk about certain aspects of mindfulness, and a lot of people tend to think of it as something that's strictly about meditation or just a way to empty your mind and to not focus on things. And I think it gets confusing for some people, and I know I've been set straight by a couple people who I've talked to about it. So I would like to know, since you're the mother of mindfulness, I mean, you are the researcher in this area, I would love to know if you could give a little bit of background about what mindfulness is and how you got involved in that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. About 40 years ago, I started studying meditation. And it turns out that meditation sets you up for post-meditative mindfulness. Meditation isn't mindfulness. It's a practice. Hopefully that leads to meditation. And then I realized that there's another way to get to the same place. And that is the very, very simple process of actively noticing new things. When you actively notice new things about the things you know, you realize you didn't know them as well as you thought you did, and your attention naturally goes to them. When you're actively noticing new things, that puts you in the present. Now, everybody says be in the present, be in the moment, but it's really an empty instruction, because when you're not there, you don't know you're not there. And 40 years of my research says, sadly, most of us are not there most of the time. Wow. All right, so you notice new things, the neurons are firing, it makes you aware that context makes a difference as you're actively noticing new things, and then thereby in the present, you feel good, you're energized. This mindfulness is energizing. Now, we've done these experiments, as I've said now, for 40 years, and we find that no matter what measure we take, we get significant improvements to one's health, one's happiness, relationships. As you're being mindful, actively noticing, you seem to be alive, and people see you as more charismatic. Your memory improves, your vision improves, everything. And the nice thing about it is that it's so easy. It's so easy that it's almost hard to believe. You just notice. What is behind a lot of this is that most of us have been taught in schools by parents to learn facts. Mm-hmm. And these facts, when taken out of context, absolutes, keep us thinking that we know. And if you know something, then there's no reason to pay any attention. But it turns out we don't know, because all of these facts change depending on the context. I was at this horse event many years ago, and this man asked me would I watch his horse, because he was going to go get his horse a hot dog. Well, that was kind of bizarre. I mean, horses are herbivorous. They don't eat meat. So I say to myself, he comes back with the hot dog, and the horse ate it. And it was at that moment that I realized virtually everything I thought I knew was wrong. But the upside of that is that everything is new. And if we approach everything as new, everything stays fresh and exciting. So we have studies where we have people be more mindful, and it improves their relationship. We have lots of research with all sorts of diseases, and we find improvements. For example, we have studies going on now with what we call attention to symptom variability. And that's just a fancy way of saying being mindful, noticing change. Now, we do this with lots of chronic illnesses, but it's true for virtually anything. Let's say you're stressed. We have studies with stress also. Okay. People who are stressed think they're stressed all the time. People who are suffering chronic pain think they're suffering all the time. Nobody is doing anything all the time. Things change. Right. And so what we do is we contact people at random times throughout the day, throughout a week, and simply ask them, how do you feel now? Is it better or worse than before? And why? And by three things happen then. The first is that since you thought you were stressed or in pain, whatever the issue is, all the time, and you see, gee, it's not all the time, you feel better. Second, by asking the question, why do you feel better now than you did before, or worse? Searching for that answer is mindful, and the 40 years of research I keep mentioning tells us strongly, actually, that that's good for your health. And third, you may find the solution. So let's say you find, Diane, that you think you're stressed all the time. When you're speaking to Ellen Langer, now you're not stressed. Well, that's interesting. When you're speaking to your mother, you are stressed. Or maybe I should have said those in the reverse. But the point is, then all you have to do is speak to me frequently. And that'll take care of a lot of the stress. Or stop speaking to your mother, or whoever the person is. Or make the interactions with one just like the other. The point is, once you start asking these questions, many solutions become obvious in situations where we previously thought we had no control. So we have these studies with multiple sclerosis, with ALS, with severe traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, stress, and so on. And sometimes it's with the caregiver, as with severe traumatic brain injury, an ALS. Most of the time it's with the person suffering, him or herself. And we teach them to attend to the changes in their symptoms. Right now, remember, what most people do is they don't pay attention unless they have the pain or whatever the symptom is. The key is in recognizing when you don't have it.
Yeah.
Right? And then people gain control over things that the medical world hasn't led them to believe they have any control over.
Well, that wouldn't be profitable, would it? That's the problem.
But, our earliest research in all of this, we took old people and we gave them mindful choices to make, and they live longer. And that sort of helped usher in mind-body medicine that most people now take for granted.
Well,
so 40 years is a long time.
It is a long time.
I'm still very old.
Well, you have done some amazing research, and I worked 20 years for the AstraZeneca, and I was thinking of how we used to, the research they used to do for the pharmaceuticals that I, when I was in that division, of how they got the side effects, and a lot of it, they'd ask them the question, do you have a headache? Well, then if you ask them in that way, then all of a sudden you got a headache, and headache would be the top symptom on the list. So it's interesting how the way things are posed to us, the way we think. And I think when I was studying curiosity, what I was interested in asking you about on that was you talk about assumptions, that we have this, we don't think horses will eat meat in our mind, right? And so we're trying to get people to be more productive and innovative and all these things that work, but we have this voice in our head telling us we're going to find something boring, that's not interesting, horses don't eat meat, whatever it is that we have told ourselves.
Yeah, whatever the facts are.
Right.
When the simple way of understanding that is, when you think you know, you don't look to find out. Why should you?
Right.
And the point is that since everything is changing, everything looks different from different perspectives, it turns out we don't know. And that's a good thing rather than a bad thing. Also, the people don't realize that our facts, scientific facts, for example, are all based on probabilities.
Right.
They're not absolutes. They say that if we were to run this study again, exactly the same way, which we can never do, but let's put that aside.
Right.
If we were to run it again, we're likely to get the same results. And that's translated by the popular press, by teachers, just friend to friend, as absolutes. So it's not that most horses, under many circumstances, don't eat meat. It's horses don't eat meat.
Right.
Which then you respond very differently to the circumstance. If you were, I don't know, we'll have you on the desert now, you'd have a camel. Do camels eat meat? No. So you're riding someplace and you get lost in the woods and there's no food. All you have are hot dogs. You're not going to give your horse a hot dog. And then you're not going to have transportation home. I never know where my thoughts are going to lead
No,
me.
I love that. That is great. Well, you know what I like when I was reading and listening to some of the interviews you've done and reading some of your work is how many negative stereotypes we have, and that some of the research that you did. I would love to just get into a couple of your studies because they're so fascinating. If we could maybe touch on maybe the counterclockwise study and the chambermaid study.
Sure.
Maybe start with the counterclockwise because I think a lot of people would find that really fascinating.
Yeah, so let me put that in context.
Okay.
That when I was realizing that we don't know, it occurred to me that even when we talk about mind and body, these are just words. And I said, let's put the mind and body back together and treat it as one. And the first test of this mind-body unity theory was the counterclockwise study, where we took old men and had them live in a retreat that had been retrofitted to 20 years earlier. They were going to live as if they were their younger selves. So the mind was being put back in time. The movies that they saw, the discussions that they had, were all from the past, spoken of as if it were the present. We had a control group that was supposed to reminisce for that same week. Now, spending time in this novel environment was going to be good for both groups, so both groups showed improvement. But what we found for the experimental group, the group that allowed themselves to be their younger selves, their memory improved, their hearing improved, their strength improved, their vision improved. We took photographs of people before the study and then again at the end of the study and had those photographs rated by people who knew nothing about the study, and they also looked significantly younger by the week's end.
Wow.
So that was the first test of this mind-body unity. That was first done in 1979. Then, much more recently, in 2007, Ali Crum and I did a study with chambermaids. Now, interesting, you asked chambermaids, are they getting any exercise? And that's all they're doing all day long is getting exercise.
Yeah.
But they don't see themselves as getting exercise. And the question is, well, what happens when they change that mindset so now they see themselves as exercising? So we took many chambermaids. We taught one group that their work was exercise, that making a bed was like working on this or that machine at the gym and so on. And as a result of simply changing their view of their work to exercise, so they weren't working any harder, they weren't eating any less, nothing was different except a change in mind. They lost weight, there was a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down.
Wow.
In another study, I'm clearly to your listeners that there's something strange about me. So when I go into a doctor's office and I'm asked to read the Snelling eye chart, everybody else just reads it and they point to a letter and you see it or you don't see it. For me, I notice that, these letters get progressively smaller, and that's creating the expectation that soon I won't be able to see. So what we did was to turn the eye chart upside down. So now the expectation is soon you will be able to see. And what happens is people can see what they couldn't see before. In another version of that, for many people, you start to have trouble seeing around 2/3 of the way down the eye chart. So what we did was to start the chart 1/3 of the way down. So now 2/3 of the way from there are going to be much smaller letters, but without people paying attention to that. To them, it's still 2/3 of the way down the chart. And again, they were able to see what they couldn't see before. The more recent version of all of this, Chandler Park and I did with diabetes. People who have type 2 diabetes show up for the study, and we always take lots of measures to start. Now, we sit them down next to a computer, and they're going to play computer games. And we ask them we have a clock next to the computer, and they're asked, change the game you're playing every 15 minutes or so. The reason for that is that for 1/3 of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For 1/3 of the people, the clock is half as fast as real time. And for 1/3 of the people, it's real time. The question we were asking was blood sugar level going to follow real or perceived time? And it turns out it follows perceived time. In another study, we have people in a sleep lab. They wake up, they think they got 2 hours more sleep than they got, 2 hours less, or the amount of sleep that they got. Then they're given all sorts of cognitive and biological tests. And again, the measures follow perceived sleep rather than real sleep. In another diabetes study, people are given a drink. They see on the label of the drink that it has a lot of sugar, or it doesn't have sugar. It's the exact same drink, neither has sugar. When they think it has sugar, their blood sugar level spikes. So our minds are far more powerful than most of us realize.
Well, if we're telling people that you've got a family history of cancer, then are we somehow?
Yes, we're doing. I think that
we're doing a disservice. That's what I'm trying to decide.
Well, I think that if people are led to believe that your mother or father had cancer, therefore you're going to get cancer, we're doing them a big disservice. Mm-hmm. If we say your mother or father had cancer and there's some relationship between cancer, there's some ways the cancer may run in families. Mm-hmm. So be careful, mm-hmm. Then it's not dangerous. But you don't want to give the data that are probabilities as if they're absolute facts. You don't want to be telling people horses don't eat meat.
Well,
diabetics can't have any sugar.
Yeah, I think that
this is not what the data show.
That we need to think in alternative outcomes, and I know you've said that the placebo, of course, is the best medicine we have, and that you were working on, you'd love to be able to make a pill like that, but without having a fake pill. What are you working on now? I mean,
okay, well, yeah, no, what I've said about is exactly as you've quoted me, that placebos are probably our strongest medicine. What we have to realize is that when you take the sugar pill, it's inert, so it's not healing you. So who's healing you? You're healing yourself. And my goal over my career has been to return that control over our health to people rather than a physician needing to prescribe a pill that's nothing. So how do we gain control over our own health? And I think that the attention to variability work leads us a long distance toward that goal. To see that, gee, I'm fine now, I'm not so fine now. What's the difference between the two situations? Even with vision, we'll stick with vision for a while. Mm-hmm. You go to the doctor, and the doctor tells you what your vision is. Well, that's the way you see in the doctor's office at that time, looking at random letters on an eye chart, mm-hmm. which is very different. I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm hungry, I see the restaurant sign in the far distance. Uh-huh. I see better from 9 to 11 than I see from 4 to 6, right. And so on. I see better on Saturday than I do on Friday. I'm making this up. But the point is that things vary. So if, let's say, one has no trouble seeing early in the day and has trouble later in the day, which most people wouldn't realize. Let's say you went to the doctor late in the day, so they take that as your vision. Then you say, well, why? Why is it that at 4 o'clock I don't see as well as I do at 11 o'clock? Maybe I'm tired, so take a nap, have an energy bar. Uh-huh. Maybe it's because you've been spending too much time reading, so take a little break, and so on. And you test different things, but what happens is, because we take these probabilities as absolute truths, this is your vision, then you go and you buy glasses, and you're forever wearing the glasses. And you think about laxatives, that if you took a laxative every day, your body would stop functioning. It would become dependent on the laxative. Mm-hmm. We become dependent on some of this medical equipment. And what we need to do is, again, notice when it's better, when it's worse. And that may speak to the way placebos work. You take a pill, and what you do is expect to be some change in your symptoms. So you're looking for change. And noticing those changes, again, is good for you in all the ways I've mentioned.
Well, I mean, this is all really fascinating to me, just from working with doctors and the time I had and how people think that they have the answers to everything. And everybody has this preconceived idea of the way the world is. And I wanted to just change directions a little bit, just because of your background is so impressive. And we didn't really touch on that because I wanted to make sure I got your information in about what you're writing about and what you speak about and all that. But your background, as you said, 40 years is a serious amount of work. I mean, what you've attained being, at Harvard and a woman. And I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen the movie on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I'm curious what you think of that, first of all. What did you think of that movie? And of what
I thought it was great. I think she's great.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting movie. And I'm wondering just because I'm so focused on curiosity and what makes people overcome and try harder and be more interested in trying things.
Well, let me tell you first the difference between mindfulness and curiosity.
Yeah, that would be great.
That when one is curious, they're going to be mindful. Mm-hmm. However, curiosity has built into it the idea that there is an answer. I'm curious about how this thing works, whatever it is. And then you show me how it works, and now I think that's the way it works. But the way it works is going to change, and I'm holding it still. An example of some of this is, I don't know how old your listeners are, but if they ask people who are, let's say, 50 and older, you're driving a car, and the car starts to skid on ice. What do? And what most people will tell you is that you gently pump the brakes. Well, that was true, and it was a lesson that was learned for safety's sake way back when. Mm-hmm. Now that we have anti-lock brakes, it's exactly the wrong thing to do. For safety's sake, what you need to do is firmly press on the brake. Okay, so what happens is we learn something at time one. We freeze it in our minds. We don't pay any attention to it anymore because we think we know. Right. And since things are changing, we often come up short.
Well, that's interesting. Don't deal with that much here in Arizona, so I didn't realize that one had changed.
Okay. Well, we'll have to play this for people on the East Coast.
Yeah, we'll have to. No, this is definitely a national show, so we're good there. But that's an interesting perspective, and I think that with the curiosity aspect is I don't want.
I have one. Wait.
Oh yeah.
Diane, I have one.
Okay, good.
People in Arizona.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if we ask them how much is 1 and 1, what will people in Arizona say?
Probably 2.
Yeah, but if you add one pile of sand to one pile of sand, 1 plus 1 equals 1.
Right. That.
Okay, so we don't know.
So we made the wrong.
We don't know even the simplest things that we think we know.
You know what I thought was.
Now you were about.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to say another guest on my show said something that I thought was interesting. If you've noticed on watch bands that have Roman numerals, they have 1, 2, 3, 4. The Roman numeral 4 on a watch has 4 lines instead of a 1 and a V. Wouldn't you assume it had a 1 and a V?
Yeah. No, the only attention I've paid to watches is the difference between analog and digital, and that I think that analog, that's the one that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. If it says it's 12:15, then it was just 12. Soon it'd be 12:30. But when the numbers just look you in the face and it says it's 12:15, it's 12:15, period. It's much more absolute.
Yeah.
It doesn't give the almost and just was.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with anything.
Well, I found it interesting anyway. Well, everything you do is really, really fascinating, and I just can't imagine what it would be like to take your courses and, all this stuff that you've done is just overwhelming. If I had to read your bio, we would still be reading it. So thank you so much for being on the show. And this was such an honor, and I hope everybody checks out your work and what you've done. But if they want to reach you, is there someplace you would like people to know about to find out more about you?
I think you just Google me and I come up. But I have 2 websites, lmlanger.com. I don't know if these have been updated in a while, but there's also the Langer Mindfulness Institute.com.
Well, this has been really wonderful, and I appreciate all the insight. I think so much is going to be focused on mindfulness this year. I think it's such a hot topic. You were so far ahead of the time that it's amazing. This must be interesting to you to see the attention it's starting to get at this point, and I hope.
No, it's nice.
Yeah, it is.
I
Nice.
just hope the concept doesn't get too watered down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that people come to see that you don't need to meditate. It's interesting. If you have a big problem, probably the mindfulness as I study it, which is so easy, may not feel good, because big problems you think need big solutions.
Right.
But for most of us, most of the time, there's no reason not to be mindful all the hours you're awake. That it's easy, it's fun, it improves your health, well-being. The products we produce, it turns out, have the imprint of our mindfulness. People find us more attractive. So I hope you and your audience can do more of this.
Well, I do too, and I think that's a great place to end. And thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. Ellen Langer.